Hello everyone, I'm Caroline and I'm from the Green Office, and today we're hosting our first Green Talk on Zoom. And we are going to discuss sustainability and fashion, and we have two speakers, Ellen and Claudia. And maybe, Ellen first, do you want to introduce yourself and Fairwear organization and what our viewers need to know about you?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm Ellen Keith and I work for Fairwear. And we're an Amsterdam-based nonprofit organization. We work internationally with garment brands, trade unions, local governments, industry stakeholders in order to try to improve the working conditions for the people who make our clothes. So we're looking at really the social side of sustainability.
Cool. And Claudia, do you want to introduce yourself and the green labels?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Claudia Anthony. I have started the Green Labels a bit more than 2 years ago now. We went live in March 2018, and we are an online shop and marketplace where we curate green, sustainable, ethical, responsible, a lot of terminology possible for that, but brands. We call it labels, based on different values, style, but also, of course, sustainable and ethical values. And I think we'll talk about it in a bit as well.
Yeah, I think both of you have criteria or values that your brands need to uphold to sign with you. Maybe you want to introduce us to them, both of you.
Sure. So as I mentioned, Fairwear is really focused on the social side of sustainability, which means that we are concerned with the working conditions for the people who are making clothes. And we work particularly with European garment brands. And these are brands who are really front runners in the industry and really committed to trying to improve the lives of these garment workers. When a brand signs up with us, they commit to trying to uphold our code of labor practices, which is made up of 8 labor standards that are based on the International Labour Organization conventions and also the UN Declaration of Human Rights. So this includes things like no child labor, reasonable hours of work, so not forcing people to work a lot of overtime, and for example, that employment is freely chosen, so avoiding, again, forced or enslaved labor. And if you're buying from our member brands, then you know that you are buying from a brand that is really a front runner in the industry and is really working hard to try to make step-by-step improvements in how their clothes are made.
And I think we discussed it already. One of the criteria that you are very proud of is the living wage criterion.
Yes, so living wage, for anyone who doesn't know, is the idea that first of all, it's a basic human right. It's the idea that we should all earn enough in order to cover our basic living expenses. So if you think about it, we all have bills to pay every month. We have our rent, we have our water and our electricity bills, but we also need a bit of a buffer for unknown expenses that might come up. For example, an emergency healthcare, someone breaks a leg and you have a lot of healthcare bills, or for example, the COVID crisis right now is a perfect example of why we all need some sort of financial safety net. And the reality is that most garment workers around the world are not earning a living wage, and some of them aren't even earning the legal minimum wage in that country. So Fairwear, we work really hard with our member brands to try to raise wages for the workers who are making the clothes for them. So if we think about the basic price of a t-shirt, if you buy a t-shirt for €29 in the store, only a small fraction, just over 0.5% of that price actually goes to paying the workers' wages. So 18 cents out of a €29 t-shirt would probably end up paying the workers and their wages. And that's just such a small amount. So, and most of that money, the cost of the t-shirt, ends up on the retailer and the brand side of things. So we're looking at ways, and we've developed tools to work with our brands and their suppliers to help raise the wages and really look at how you can make changes in the price of a product that will have a small impact on the consumer and the brand, but could have a big impact on the garment workers. So we're really proud of some of the work that our brands are doing in order to pilot new projects and new techniques on raising wages.
Okay. And Claudia, do you also want to tell us about the values of the green labels?
Yeah, of course. So first, I mean, a lot of our brands actually are also Fairware certificated. I'm thinking of Kings of Indigo, for example, I think. So certification are definitely not like something we like completely reject and find our own framework or something. They're complementary, I think. It's just that when we started the green labels, I really thought it was important to map what sustainability can mean, because if you look at sustainability in fashion, I think nowadays it's a word that has been used so much that I also struggle using it myself when I describe what we do, because like sustainability can be defined as social, economical, and environmental, right? That's the initial definition I think that came up, but nowadays it's so much focused into maybe environmental impact or like the green part of sustainability that is mostly used. So we look at different things at the green labels. We try to look at different things. One of them, the first, is the prerequisite, which is ethically made or fair made. That doesn't mean that the brand has to be certified fair trade or Fairware Foundation, for example. We work with very small brands as well that are like single women-led brands, you know, and they don't have yet the means to basically be part of a certification or have a certification. So they audit themselves, their factory, they visit their factory very often. So we also rely on that kind of way to look at ethically made or fair made. And then we have 4 more values that are vegan, local, waste reduction, and clean process. And they all, well, look at different angles of what people or consumers are often looking into for sustainability or sustainable brands. Vegan is, of course, that no animal products are used in the making of the garment. This is quite specific nowadays, and more people are it's their wish actually to really not contribute into that industry of using animal products. The other one being clean process, it's one of the broadest one, but this one really looks into if the brand is using innovative fabrics or innovative ways of producing in order to reduce its environmental impact. Clean waste reduction is anything that is involved in circularity, so it can be using recycled materials, but also dead stock fabrics. And local is for European brands producing in Europe, but it can also be that brands, for example, like Oh My Bag or Veja that we also carry on the shop, they are not producing in Europe, whereas there are European brands, but they are heavily involved in their community and building and supporting the local communities in their country. So we also look into that aspect. So yeah, that's how we look into brands and sustainability.
I think that summarizes quite well how sustainability looks in these 2 different aspects. So maybe the next question is, why is sustainable fashion important to you?
First of all, I just wanted to add something to Claudia's point, talking about certification. One thing that we really stress as Fairware is that we're not technically a certification body. We really, we don't believe that there's such a thing right now as 100% fair fashion. So we really, when we're working to promote our member brands, we really want consumers to keep in mind that we feel these are brands that are really working really hard to make a difference, and they are leading the industry, but we don't want to say that any of their products are necessarily 100% fair, because just the nature, as Claudia said, there's so many different aspects of sustainability, so many different factors to try to keep an eye on that. And the way that clothes are produced is in such really complex international supply chains that it's really almost impossible for a brand to know exactly how their clothes are made at every step of the way, from the way the cotton is harvested to the way it's being sewn and how buttons are being added on. So yeah, so we're always trying to make a bit of a distinction in that we're not fully certifying products, but we are saying, you know, if you're buying from these brands, you know that they're leading the industry and they're working really hard. But we believe it's all part of a process. And I think that kind of also reflects on Claudia's points about sustainability in general.
I 100% stand behind that because, for example, on the green labels, we also have at each product detail, we have a transparency wheel where we ask our brands and every brand that is on the shop, we have 2 to 4 steps in the production where we ask for facts. And for garment, it can be indeed like the seed from the seed to the garment. And even really big brands that I call that are really ahead in terms of sustainability, sometimes they don't know all the elements, and that's really important as well for consumers to understand that it's really a process that a brand is taking when they embark in this sustainable or responsible journey. And for us, we really don't look at point A, you need to check all the boxes and everything needs to be perfect, because that's actually not possible and also not fair in a way. We rather look indeed at the process, and by asking every season when we receive the new garments the same questions, we can see if there's an improvement, and we can see if brands are taking steps in the right direction. And in that way, it also gives us an insight on whether we want to continue working with this brand or not. So yeah, that's like very much stand behind what you say, Ellen.
Yeah, I think just in what you're saying, so much of it is really about the improvements. And I think something that not many people know about the garment industry is just the reality of how it's set up. And I think when I started at Fairwear, I was under the assumption that most brands own the factories that their clothes are made at. And that's really not the case. So for example, you know, you hear people throwing around comments about, this brand and their sweatshops or something. But in most cases, the brand might be one of, say, 20 or 30 brands that are actually placing orders with a particular factories. And so that means that they also don't have full control over the working conditions in that factory, because they don't have the type of leverage that you would have if you own the factory yourself. And that on top of that is things like, say, a factory might outsource part of their production. So they might send a pair of jeans to a subcontractor in order to get certain zippers stitched on or something. And if a brand's not aware of that, then suddenly there's working conditions going on that they don't have their eyes on and that are completely out of their control.
Yeah, true.
So can I summarize that what makes fashion sustainable, or at least one big part of it, is if brands really try to make progress and not necessarily at which point they are right now?
Yeah, I think it's a really long, complex journey to get to sustainability. And we've seen a lot of really big improvements in, say, the food industry, and how shopping organic is becoming more and more mainstream. And I think that, going back to your question about why sustainability is important to me or to us as a group, I think it really is time for sustainability in fashion, the idea of fair fashion, to move from a really niche market to the norm. And more people need to have it on their mind, especially about how we're consuming clothing. I think if I look at myself and my social media habits, for example, you start to see this idea of always needing to look Instagram perfect, or these people, influencers who constantly have an endless supply of outfits. And I think that's sort of propagating this idea of fast fashion and disposable clothing. And I think that there's research done that says that the average person in the Netherlands tosses away 40 items of clothing every year. And some of those might have only been worn a handful of times. So we really need to change our whole mindset on how we're buying clothes and why, and whether or not we're actually going to get enough use out of them.
Yeah. Claudia, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, well, because your question was also a bit personal, like how did my sustainable fashion journey start? And I can also share that because I think it's a very maybe common one, and I hear it a lot in the niche, like you said, Ellen, because it's still very much niche. But of course, like, it starts by becoming more conscious of your own habits and how you consume fashion. And when I was maybe 25, 26 years old, and I had my first corporate job, and I simply had some money on my bank accounts, I was like, yeah, let's buy a lot of fashion items and look good and feel good about myself through that behavior. And even maybe younger, when I was a student as well. But like, that evolved into a place where I was actually very unhappy about myself, and I didn't feel good. I didn't feel better through buying this. I felt actually quite unhappy. My closet was clogged. I was not really like seeing any item anymore. I was not really feeling that I was expressing myself through fashion. That was not even there anymore. And I think at some point I moved to China for part of a job, and I worked there for a year. And in China, it really, really hit me, like, the whole environmental situation where we're in, and that was already like 6 years ago. I arrived there in March, and I really didn't see the sun for more than a month. I was in Shanghai, and I really couldn't see the sun. And it was like the first time that it really, really hit me, like, all those stories about sustainability, it's actually now. It's not like in 10, 20, 30 years. It's already in action, in full action, and you can already see it from your own eyes. And I think that's what a lot of people miss sometimes in the sustainability part, is to get really aware of it, is that it's fully visible in some places in the world, of course, and in our daily life. And in the pretty clean Amsterdam, we maybe don't see it every day, but it's fully there. So from there, my journey started, and I looked into, okay, I'm well educated, from the West, lady, and if people like me don't take action and start something to change things, then no one will. So that's where my sustainability journey started, and I looked into different industry that I was kind of more interested in, and fashion was one of them. And progressively watching documentaries, I think everyone, or not everyone, but watch the True Cost movie. I think it's one of the biggest one. There's more after that as well. And I think from there on, becoming aware of this, there was no way back for me. I couldn't get into an H&M or Zara or even any brand that I wouldn't actually see clearly where this come from. I couldn't buy from it anymore. So I think I didn't buy any item for more than a year and a half or something. And it was quite awakening, because it was also an urge for me every time I was seeing a shop before to just go in and get something, and realizing that you don't have to do that, and you can actually look at your closet, clean it up, really think of which item you wear. You don't get to understand your style as well better in that way. So it was sort of a cleansing, a fashion cleansing, I would call it. And after a while, deciding to go into that journey of starting my own company, and that in that way was very truthfully coming from sort of passion and belief that I could contribute to inspire people and to shop hopefully more sustainably and more ethically as well. So that's a bit why I think fashion is, and sustainability in the fashion industry is important to me.
We actually got a viewer question about this topic, because people, for example, not in China, but in the Netherlands, where we can still see the sun. The question is, how can we appeal to students who buy cheap clothes from stores like H&M to overthink their patterns? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think, first of all, it's really about thinking really critically about every time you're buying something. A lot of people say, are you going to wear this 30 times? If you don't think you are, then maybe that's something you don't need. For example, I found myself guilty of buying a top that I know I'm only going to wear on New Year's Eve, and the rest of the year it just doesn't, it's a bit too festive or something. So now I try to think a lot more critically about those types of decisions. And it's really not necessarily the case that if an item of clothing is a lot cheaper, that it's necessarily bad. We do work with brands on all ends of the spectrum. Some of our brands are what you would consider more fast fashion, but they are working really hard within the way that their clothes are being produced to be keeping an eye on working conditions and to be making constant improvements in that. So just because you're buying from a higher end brand doesn't necessarily mean that you're buying something that's made in a more sustainable way. Because if we think back to what I said about multiple brands having their clothes made at the same factory, in many cases you'll see a very high-end brand whose t-shirts are made on the same assembly line as a very cheap fast fashion brand. So really, I would say, if you're thinking of buying things, to do a little bit of research into brands and look at the types of brands that are out there that are really trying to make a difference. And you're seeing more and more filters, for example, on retailer sites like I think Zalando now has a sustainability filter. So to try to look a little bit more before buying things, and then also ask questions when you're in the store, and ask some of the salespeople if they know where the clothes are made. Even if they don't, those types of questions are the questions that are going to stimulate change, because at a certain point, if the salespeople keep getting asked about how the clothes are made, those questions are going to reach the brand. And if the brands see that consumers care about how their clothes are made, then we have more motivation for the brands to change as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think on that question, I also I do want to say though that even though I agree, certainly some faster fashion brands or cheaper brands are certainly making efforts in the right direction. There is though, like you said earlier, Ellen, like a sort of a mindset, like a disposable fashion kind of mindset that Western consumers are now heavily, or even not only Westerners, but like we're heavily like guilty of in a way, and that encourages like this kind of vicious circle of, like we heard, like 28 seasons of production cycles at Zara or things like this, because every week we want something new in the shops. And that, of course, puts a lot of pressure on price, and it does also give a misconception that a t-shirt that is worth maybe 35 euros or 40 is super expensive, whereas sometimes that's the right price for it, and so I understand the cheap part of it, and I completely completely understand the problematic for students or people with less means that do not want to pay that price. But like, let's ask ourselves as well, like, then do we need to buy 10 of those cheap t-shirts, or can we not just wait a bit, buy maybe one that we really, really like and that we're going to wear longer, instead of just giving into that vicious circle that at the end is just cluttering your closet. You won't be happy with it at the end. You might feel good and urge and a drop of adrenaline when you buy it, or endorphin, I don't know, but it goes away quite fast, and then you're just left over with a lot of bad quality clothes where, like, you're certainly not gonna wear. So I would say do your research for sure, and research needs to go further than just like what brand is nicely writing on their website. Sometimes you can read through the words. Are they really trying to be transparent? Are they using certificates? Are they really pointing out where they make their clothes? Like last week was Fashion Revolution Week, and I think it's a very important moment for the fashion industry, where there's also a lot of talks about transparency, and this year it was also about what we can do further than transparency, because now some brands are also using transparency as a way to just say, like, look, this is what we produce and where and what, and we're all good because we're transparent. But actually transparency is only the first step. Then the next step is action, right? And change. So yeah, I think as consumer, we should not be like also greenwashed or too easily greenwashed into what brands. Some brands now are surfing on this sustainable wave in fashion, and it's a complicated topic. So I'm not saying I have all the answers, but just becoming aware of all of this is also the first big step, definitely.
Yeah, I think building what you're saying on the idea of these fast fashion and the low prices and how much you're consuming. If you stop and think about it, if you have a couple of t-shirts or a t-shirt for €5, it's probably not going to be made in a way to last. So if you are able to spend a little bit more on a better quality t-shirt, taking aside the labor conditions for a second, it's going to be more durable. You're going to get a lot more use out of it, a lot more longevity, and in the end the cost is probably going to balance out. If you have to buy 5 t-shirts that are €2 to get you through the same amount of time as one, that's a bit better quality. So think about the material, how it's made as well. And also what Claudia was saying about having a lot of different seasons in the year. These brands that are producing, that are constantly changing the clothes in their shops with many seasons, you also have to think about how that's impacting the factories and the workers as well, because the more seasons a brand puts out during the year, the more collections that they have, then the more production pressure they're putting on the factories and the workers. And that's always going to lead to unforeseen consequences on the worker side of things. Maybe workers are forced to work extra overtime because they need to make the really tight deadlines because brand X wants to put out an extra collection. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Please go ahead.
I go on ever, because as well I have some, like, I think what you said, like, one criteria that people can look into is the cost per wear, and it's just what you explained before. It's basically the cost an item, the price or the cost of an item costs you every time you wear it. So if you would buy a coat, a winter coat, for example, that's for me my best purchase. That is, you know, like, I've been wearing it already for 3 years, and I wear it literally from end of October to end of April, almost every day, or mid-April. This year it was already a good month, but yeah. And then the cost per wear, I bought it €370. Yeah, I need to do the math quickly, but I think it's around already €3 or €4 that it cost me per wear, you know. And maybe a cheap t-shirt at Zara that I would have bought even €20 would, and it wore 2 times, because after 2 washes it was already all like looking not nice, with a lot of how do you call it, the cotton was already falling off and peeling. Sorry, that was the word. It already cost more, because it would have been like €10 per wear, because then I stopped wearing it. So this kind of thing is really important, I think, to think of, and not be only like, oh, it's expensive because it's €369 or more, or yeah. So I think it's really important to think in that way. And just to add on the fact of the cheap, bad quality clothing, last year we had a panel talk at our pop-up that we organized, and we had a member of Symphony, which is the recycling company in Amsterdam that collects a lot of the clothing. So the orange bins that are everywhere in the city, and even when they're not orange, actually they're all from Symphony. And she was explaining to us, the lady that works there, that her biggest problem right now is the fact that they collect so much bad quality clothing, they don't know what to do with it. And it's super difficult to recycle. It's all mixed fabrics. Plus it's just very bad quality, so it's very difficult to recycle. The fibers are not even usable after recycling. So that's also really serving like a really bad, again, vicious circle, where we push a lot of bad quality things, and at the end of the circle it's also not possible to do anything with it. So recycling of clothing is a very, very complex thing that we haven't really like solved at this day. So people that think that, oh, we throw it away, like it's recycled, no, like there's such a small amount of percentage of clothing that are nowadays recycled. So that's also very very problematic.
Yeah, I would say just be more strategic about your shopping choices. It's smart maybe to invest in a couple of really slightly better quality basics that you can mix and match a lot. And then you can come up with just as many outfits if you're a little more strategic in having really good quality kind of neutral pieces to form the basis for your wardrobe.
We got one more viewer question related to the money. It is, can sustainable fashion ever be cheap? And I think maybe you already answered it kind of, because you were both just talking about it. but maybe this is something to consider for the future. Can sustainable and fair fashion ever be the same price as fast fashion?
Do you want to start, Ellen?
Yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit already in terms of talking about the wide range of brands that we work with. So we have brands like Taco, and Zeeman just started with us as well. So that's obviously much more on the cheap end of the spectrum. So essentially, we really need to be looking into what a brand is doing, trying to look past the greenwashing and look for really concrete evidence where they're being transparent. And no brand is totally perfect yet, but it's all about making these long-term improvements. And I think, again, this is about trying to move everything from being niche market to norm. The more normal it becomes to be thinking about sustainability and how you're producing clothes, then the more affordable it's going to become for everyone, and we're going to lower that bar. But yeah, right now it's still, we still need to take that extra step, and a big part of that is having consumers on board and really being more conscious of the type of clothing that they're wearing.
Yeah, to add on this, I think for me, I have also good examples within the shop, working with actually different sizes of brands. So we work with, for example, Armed Angels, which is a really big German brand, and they're certainly one of the most affordables on the shop. I sometimes hear from consumers that it's expensive, but still expensive, but it's pretty rare. I would say, like, for example, one of our best sellers this season is a jumpsuit that is 82 euros. I think for me that it gets difficultly at a lower price level than this, especially for a full jumpsuit outfit. Their t-shirts are around, 25 to 35 euros, simple cotton t-shirt. And I think what they're doing as a leading brand, and they're really driving volume, that's also their strategy. They're really going for like being a big brand in the sustainable fashion industry. So they're working with, some cool new fabrics sometimes. So they started working with Ecovero, which is a tensile fabric. And the fact that they have the volume, they also drive the prices down because they are ordering a lot. So the whole Ecovero brand and producers are also benefiting from it, and other smaller brands have started using Ecovero, certainly because their price have dropped eventually as well. So I think it's like a positive effect of bigger brands driving prices down, and the more indeed we will move out of the niche and more people will buy those brands, the more they can drive continuously prices down. Nevertheless, there's counter effects. Of course, they're like, I also have some brands that have no intention to become a big mass market brand, and they will not position themselves in that way, and they don't want to do that. And so in that way, like we have in the fashion landscape nowadays, there's also brands that they have no intention of becoming, H&M price range, and that's completely fine as well. And another point I wanted to point out, is is that the point again, that every sustainable brand becomes very cheap and affordable? Because price at least has the advantage to make consumers question themselves before they buy, and in that way it's still a good thing, if you're gonna invest in a piece that you think initially, oh, it's quite pricey, but you really thought it through and this is something you're gonna wear a lot, again, the cost per wear will certainly be worth it. So yeah, at the end we need to ask ourselves, is it the point to have the cheapest possible price available on every single piece that we buy? Maybe that's actually for our best if it's not as cheap as we would like it to, and so easy to, just grab it. Oh, it's the price of the sandwich, let's do it,
Exactly. I completely agree with that. Back to the point that you made earlier about maybe some of these prices, these prices that are so low are too low. And if we think back to what I said about the breakdown cost of a t-shirt and how little of that goes to the workers, and those workers aren't actually earning enough to cover all their monthly expenses, that's because the price that's being set by the brand and the retailers for the cost of a t-shirt is being set too low already. So really we're dealing with a standard that's too low for the whole industry in a lot of cases. So we also, in that sense need to shift our mindset a little bit about what is affordable clothing and what should the value of a t-shirt or a pair of jeans be.
Yeah.
Another question related to the do you have any visions or dreams for your organizations?
Yeah, I can start, but I think for me, when I started the Green Labels, it was really also to inspire people that are also really much into style and fashion as it is, to find also cool, stylish. I don't like to use trend because of course we don't want to give into that, but trends I don't think can be fully eliminated of fashion, because fashion is a very creative business, and every year people think about new things and how to design and make them appealing, and as part of the industry. So I think a dream for the Green Labels is definitely to become sort of a reference in Europe, at least, for cool and responsibly made fashion. So some customers tell us, "Oh, you're the Urban Outfitters of sustainable fashion." Something like this would be super cool if it could be written in a newspaper. Like, I'm kidding, but yeah, something like this would be a great achievement, I think, and yeah, to make sustainable fashion more accessible to people that do not want to compromise on style. That's what we're aiming for. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for fair wear, a lot of what we've been talking about in this conversation has been on the consumer end of things, but a lot of our work that we're doing really is industry focused and dealing with other important players in the industry. We really feel that we need everyone on board in order to have lasting change in the garment industry. So that includes trade unions, the workers, brands, but also governments, both internationally and locally. And I think Fairwear is in a really good position to be able to share a lot of our knowledge and our tools that we're developing with these other players. So I think for us, we're trying to push towards a position to really being kind of an authority on that subject. And especially, as I mentioned, in living wage, really focusing on sharing our tools, getting them out there, not just to our brands, but having a lot of our information and our training available for people across the industry to be able to implement. And on top of that, I think for us, the ultimate goal is to really make sure that the power is in the hands of the workers. So in an ideal world, Fairwear wouldn't need to exist anymore, and the workers would be able to stand up for themselves and really have that voice to negotiate their own improved working conditions. So we're really working towards that, on how we can improve dialogue between workers and employers and governments to make sure that they have a better platform to negotiate for their own rights.
Is there anything since the COVID outbreak that changed for the workers, or also for both of you personally, or for your organization?
Yeah, for us, it's been really quite a crisis situation. We're treating it as a human rights crisis. I think if I consider myself, my own personal life has barely changed at all. I can work from home quite easily. But COVID-19 has showed us how reliant the entire world is on this kind of global assembly line of people who make the products that we use every day. And this crisis is really having a much more severe impact on people in these garment producing countries who don't have, as I said before, that kind of financial safety net that, for example, that I'm used to having. I can live off savings for a while if I need to, but if you're not earning enough to have savings in the first place, then you're really in a very difficult position when something like this happens. As an organization, we cannot do a lot of our regular activities right now. So normally we conduct audits and training sessions in the factories. We can't do that. So a lot of the problems that were already there have become a lot more urgent. And I think the crisis is also really emphasizing how important it is to pay the garment workers better, so that if something like this were to happen again, that they have a little bit more of a safety net for these kind of emergencies. So we're really pushing brands we're working with other organizations to really ask brands and governments to try to protect their workers who are making their clothes, and to really, for the brands to honor the orders that they've made already, and not be canceling things, and really upholding their working relationships with their suppliers.
Mm-hmm. Claudia, anything for you?
Yeah, I think personally, I can also be, blessed that, our working conditions are changed, of course, but not dramatically. And we are a very small company, so we can still operate. We're luckily mostly selling online, so we are actually not so much affected by the crisis directly. But nevertheless, we've been talking a lot about it. Actually, last week we've done a series of live sessions on Instagram with a lot of our brands, and yeah, COVID has affected almost all of them. Some of them had their production completely stopped, especially in Spain with some brands we work, or they actually have cancelled. They're stopping to deliver because they don't want to put in danger their colleagues. So I think it has definitely affected the whole fashion industry quite hard. Of course, the big headlines also shown, like what said Ellen, that some of the big names didn't pay their orders and they cancelled simply because they were not able to sell it. And that's so unfair and sad in a way, because workers have already worked for the 3 months before on producing all of this, and suddenly they're left with all the stock and no money. So it's pretty devastating indeed, and I think there should be indeed more rules and regulations to oblige this kind of situation to be not possible to happen, because it's completely like crazy when you think about it. But luckily we are trying to pay all our brands, and we're trying to help them as much as we can by promoting them, and supporting small businesses in this crisis is definitely, I think, something really important to keep in mind and continue doing. And small businesses such as sustainable brands is even nicer, because I think and I hope that after this crisis, or it's already shifting, I think, mentalities of people through this COVID situation, and people are becoming through that crisis also a bit more aware of our impacts, and where this crisis originated is simply also heavily due to environmental situations that were not exactly like they should have been, and that's how viruses like this can spread as well. So I have hope that this crisis will eventually also serve something positive in that way, that people can become more conscious, more aware, and that could also touch the fashion side of their consumption habits.
Yeah, I think we are in a really strong position now to take a step back and really think critically about how we can work to change the industry for good, because a crisis like this really brings out all the problems with the industry, and we also understand that the brands are really struggling, but so are the workers. So this is a good opportunity for everyone to think a little bit more consciously about how they're shopping and how we consume clothing.
Okay, is there anything that you still want to say before we close this off? Is there anything that I missed?
I think it was a very thorough conversation. I don't have anything in my mind right now that pops up, but I think that my last message would just be just go on your own journey and ask yourself, and don't be afraid to ask the difficult questions, even if you don't have the answers. As a consumer, I think that's the best way to start, and while looking, things will come and you'll find solutions. There's already a lot of solutions out there, and Fair Wear Foundation offers great way to also look into that problem of wages and other social things. And we are an example of solution as well, with all the brands that we carry on our shop. So, and there's plenty more out there as well, and there's great people trying to do great things. So better put a bit more, wait a bit more and support those guys, rather than support some other ones that are not yet on track where we should be for our future, basically, for all of us.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And I would just add, you know, we've talked a lot about the different types of sustainability and how big of an umbrella term it is and how many different things it can mean. So that can be really overwhelming as a consumer. And, you know, as a consumer, you also don't need to feel that you need to try to be perfect and do drastic changes overnight, but pick something, pick a goal for yourself, whether it's asking more questions in shops or paying more attention to the labels, doing a little bit more research before you shop, or trying to limit the amount of clothing that you buy. It's all about making these steps and gradually working towards something bigger.
Okay.
Yeah, sense. Yeah, it's a journey and it won't happen in overday. Even I think for every one of us that is really active in there, it's taking many years to come here and it's still not finished at all. So it's definitely a journey that just needs to be started, and then it's already great steps. So I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, great final words, I think. I want to thank you both for joining us. I will leave both of your the green labels in Fairware organization wherever we upload it. And yeah, thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye. Have a good day.